Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota from, of course, Washington. Senator, thanks for being with us. Always good to talk to you, sir.
You bet, Cheryl. Good to be with you.
One of the things we're hearing this morning from many of your colleagues in the Senate and over on the House is that they're not really going to get a chance to read this thing. It's 1,071 pages. They're just going to have to go in and vote no matter what. How do you respond to that?
That's one good reason to vote no. Nobody's had a chance to look at this. The details just came together. We're finally in receipt of the, as you said, over 1,000 pages of text. And it's going to be impossible for most members of Congress, members of the House and the Senate to have an opportunity to review this carefully and to cast an informed vote. Now, many of us are at least acquainted with the bills as they've moved through the House and the Senate. A lot of it hasn't changed. A lot of it's got the same big spending programs in it, and I don't think many minds are going to change on the Republican side in either the House or the Senate when it comes to the final vote.
So, Senator, we spend a lot of time on TV. We spend a lot of time interviewing Congress people and senators like yourself, and a lot of them say, boy, this thing stinks. We hate this thing. We hate to have to do this, yet it seems to be pushing its way through fairly rapidly considering the size, $800 billion just about. Is there a chance this thing gets delayed? Is there a chance we take another look at this thing?
I would hope so. You would think that at some point people would come to the realization of what we're doing here and how much this spans. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office says that if the 20 most popular programs in the bill get extended, it won't cost just the $800 billion. It will cost over $3 trillion over the next 10 years. And we all know what happens when these government programs get funded. It's hard to turn the spigot off. This is going to be a very expensive, massively expensive program, which I think the American people are reacting to. And I hope they are weighing in, continuing to weigh in. But there is time, obviously, to go back to the drawing board and do this right. And many of us have offered alternatives which make more sense, that actually do stimulate the economy, do create jobs, and don't just spend a lot of money here in Washington, D.C., which really doesn't solve the problem and only borrows trillions of dollars from future generations and creates greater economic consequences down the road, which we think are going to be very, very harmful to the economy.
Senator Thune, you know, I hear and I read all the time about the examples the Republicans are throwing out there as wasteful spending. Even if it's for something like the D.C. sewer system, new cars for government workers, isn't that still putting money into the economy? If you spend $300 million on new cars, isn't that still spending $300 million on fleet cars from General Motors or Ford, where these two companies are really hurting right now and need somebody to spend that $300 million on cars? Doesn't that provide jobs down the road and get dollars into the system still?
There's a certain amount of this money that ought to make some difference. And when you're talking about spending $1 trillion, sure. I mean, there are some things in here that hopefully will do some good. But when you weigh it, when you weigh the cost per job created, which is over $700,000 per job based on the number of jobs that Congressional Budget Office projects that this will create, it's an enormous amount of money to be spending per job. And much of it does create long-term spending programs in Washington, D.C. that aren't going to go away. So, sure, there may be some things in here that make some difference at the margin, but at the end of the day, you're talking about borrowing $1 trillion, which is going to lead to higher interest rates and inflation in the future, more debt for future generations to deal with at a time when we're already indebted enough. We've gotten so leveraged as a nation, and the federal government is only adding to that. This goes about it entirely the wrong way. There's too much wasteful spending. It doesn't do enough.
Senator, let me jump in here real quick because you mentioned jobs created. I interviewed Christine Romer, who, as you know, heads the Obama economic team. And I said, the language changed from jobs created to jobs created or saved recently, and that's not the way it started. My question is this. How do you define the difference between a job created or a job saved? It seems that the more important number would be the jobs created.
True, and I don't know what that means. They have changed. It's a distinction they're now making, created or saved. I don't know how you measure the number of jobs saved. It seems to me the more important number is the number of jobs created. In Christine Romer's own methodology, the bill that was voted on in the House, the Republicans offered it up as an alternative, and I offered it as an amendment in the Senate, actually creates twice as many jobs, over 6 million jobs, at half the cost. There's just a much better way to do this, Tom, and frankly, I'm I think a lot of us are frustrated we didn't have more input in this, but the fact of the matter is this is business as usual. This is a big spending bill, a Washington, D.C. spending bill, which I think funds a lot of things that people have been trying to get funded for the past several years and haven't been able to do it, and are using this as an opportunity to get that done.
All right. Well, Senator John Thune from Washington. Senator, always great to speak to you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl.
All right, joining us now.